So what you're seeing is a number of our good friends who appear on this screen for this, our first virtual attempt at a session. And thanks to our good friends at Congress with the sequester cuts, this has had to be possible. Our sincerest apologies to our friends online, and we hope for someday to be able to have them join us live. But Jodi sent me a note and said, Ken, we got trouble, we can't travel. And I said, Jodi, you're not getting away that easily. All right, so now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. F.Flaim. We've met Steve already. He's the founder and president of F.Flaim Partners Consulting. He's a fellow at the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, the American College of Clinical Pharmacology, and the Royal Society of Medicine. Steve is past chairman of the Board of Governors for Tech Coast Angels. We've heard that. Past president of the San Diego Network of Tech Coast Angels. An entrepreneur in residence with Connect. Chairman of the Board of Directors for the John G. Watson Foundation, and is active in numerous regional and national scientific organizations. We've also heard that Steve is a technology and business advisor to the William J. von Liebig Center for Entrepreneurism and Technology Advancement at UCSD, and a special advisor in this capacity today to the Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination in the Division of Extramural Research Activities at the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institutes of the National Institutes of Health. Steve will moderate our online panel, Advancing Chemical Innovation Through Government Partnerships. And I think at this point, again, it's my pleasure to reintroduce Stephen to you. Steve?
Well, thanks, Ken. It's a pleasure to be here once again. I'm actually going to be on this podium another couple of times before this conference is over. It's unfortunate that my colleagues up on the screen are not able to be here with us today, so we've put together this online conference. Just a little bit of housekeeping. They're going to speak, and then there's going to be a question and answer. When we have questions from the audience, you're going to need to use a microphone because your questions are going to have to be re-read by a gentleman up in the balcony behind so that the panelists will be able to hear your questions as stated by him. So be sure you use a microphone so that he can hear you, and there's going to be a delay because he's going to have to translate the question over the line to the panelists. So they can't hear us as we sit here right now, but they can hear him when he talks to them through a separate channel. So with that, Dave, I'm going to go ahead then and introduce Jodi Black, who is Deputy Director of the Division of Extramural Research Activities at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute in Washington, D.C., Bethesda, Maryland, who's going to make the first presentation.
Jodi, you're live.
Okay, thank you. Actually, Steve, I could hear you very faintly, but I could hear you. So thanks and welcome to the session on advancing chemical innovation through government partnerships. The presenters in this session are going to describe some of the federal government programs that are designed to enable, catalyze, and help you navigate transitioning your academic discoveries to commercial potential. I'm going to describe a program at the NIH called the Centers for Accelerated Innovations, and then Kurt Marek will give you an overview of the SBIR STTR program and some of the initiatives there. Dedrick Carter from the National Science Foundation will describe their I-Corps program that promotes entrepreneurial education and mentorship. And then Peder Maarbjerg will tell us about a Department of Energy program called Tech to Market, which is an assistance program. So what we're hoping to do is give you a more comprehensive view of the federal programs that are available to help you transition technologies from discovery to the market to improve the lives of the public. Whoops. So I'm getting the hang of this too. Let's try that. So my slides are not advancing. Dave.
Okay, I'll advance them for you.
Okay, so let's try this again. So first, I'll just give you a brief background about the NIH, which is where I work. It's the largest single source of funding for biomedical research in the world. Our budget's about $30 billion, but over 80% of that goes back out to academic researchers in the community. And the mission of NIH is to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems, and then to apply that knowledge to reduce the burdens of disability and enhance health. Our general approach to accomplishing that mission has been to fund basic research and clinical testing, and also training and career development and knowledge dissemination. However, a couple of years ago, can you advance, Dave? This is going to be very difficult. One more. A couple of years ago, our director, back up one. Sorry. A couple of years ago, our director, Francis Collins, published an editorial in Science, and he noted that there were several areas that he identified for research at NIH that were ripe for major advances that could reap substantial downstream benefits, and one of them was translational medicine. And he also noted that critics have complained in the past that NIH is too slow to translate our discoveries out into advances in the clinic. And so we're recognizing the need that we have to facilitate translating the fruits of our basic and clinical research efforts into products that are deployable to patients. Next slide, next advance, please.
Okay, Jodi, I think you can do it now.
You do? Okay. Nope. Oh, here we go. Was that me or you? Sorry.
That was you.
Okay. So to help us address this issue at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, we put together a working group, and we mapped out the discovery to commercialization pipeline to help guide our thinking. We also layered onto that where the work got done and who normally paid for it, and noted that in this financial environment, that those folks who are used to be willing to fund very early stage technology development had become risk averse and preferred more mature technologies. And so we layered onto that our funding and assistance programs, and they're not coming up. Oh, there they are. So we have our regular grant programs, the R01 program, plus our SBIR program, which is designed for to enable commercializing technologies, and some of our assistance programs, Bridges and SMART, which you see towards the bottom, and they help with doing preclinical testing. And we noticed that there were two gaps around the SBIR program. One at the end of the Phase 2 award, and Marek is going to talk about some of the strategies we've taken to address that particular gap. But the first gap was at the very beginning, at the very earliest stages of technology development, right after an innovator has discovered something, and they need additional funding to do the scientific feasibility studies, which at this point are not hypothesis-driven, and they really don't have any idea what to do next, where to get the funding, or where to go for help. And so we recognized, though, that the problem was more than just a lack of money. The problem included a lack of knowledge and understanding about how biomedical technologies are brought to market, and a lack of access to sufficient technology development and commercialization expertise and resources. So from an academic's point of view, the path from discovery to market was very fragmented, confusing, and frustrating, and scientists are not trained to be entrepreneurs. So the working group that we put together suggested we developed initiatives to help deal with these problems and address these gaps. So the NHLBI formed the Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination about 2 years ago, and charged it with developing initiatives that will enhance the translation of technologies from the bench to the market. So we are staffing up this office with folks that have both business development and regulatory expertise that will be able to provide advice to the research community at large. We've also consolidated and are managing our SBIR program in a more coordinated way, also again to help assist the outside community with developing those applications and understanding the rules. We're enhancing our outreach and partnership activities because we know that we're not going to be able to do this on our own. Most of the initiatives that come out of this office require strategic partners and additional sources of funding. And so we're constantly looking for folks to work with us. And we're developing more strategic initiatives that are designed to enable continued research and development that's guided by commercialization requirements. And one of those initiatives is the Centers for Accelerated Innovations. And the way that center works, looks something like this. This is a grant program, so there'll be awards will be made. The awardees will set up a center's program that has relationships with research performing institutions through structured agreements so that they can interact with the innovators and solicit the technologies they've been developing. Select them based on medical, scientific, and business review. And for those that are accepted into the center, they'll be given additional capital to conduct the non-hypothesis feasibility studies that are required to define the product. But the innovator and the technology will be surrounded by an appropriate team of experts for that technology and the innovator, so that those studies can be conducted in a way that meet business case requirements, regulatory strategy requirements, intellectual property issues requirements, and product development requirements, all guided by very stringent project management processes, so that at any time during the development process it becomes clear that the technology is not going to meet a predetermined milestone that we can stop working on it immediately. So this is the fail fast, go, no-go, stage gate kind of philosophy we're trying to instill. The goal of the program is to develop the technology to a point where it's able to attract the next level of independent financing and exit the center, either through a licensing to a for-profit or not-for-profit entity, or by spinning out a new company. We can imagine that during the development process, there'll be a lot of opportunity to access NIH or NHLBI existing resources, and this program is a cooperative agreement, so we're going to help with that. In addition, the program has a required education and skills development component so that innovators will be mentored and be able to take classes or other sources of education so that they really understand what it takes and what their role is and what their role isn't in the course of transitioning and commercializing the technology. And so we see the Center's program interacting with other federal programs as depicted on this slide. So we have investigator-initiated and institute-initiated programs, much like many of the other federal agencies do. Through those sources of funding, they make the awardees make discoveries that will move into the center for continued scientific and business-related development. We can see that during the development process, there'll be opportunity to leverage at no cost already available resources at the NIH. At the bottom left, you'll see the NHLBI has resources that help with preclinical studies. That's the SMART program. The GTRP is a gene therapy research program that can help develop vectors. And PACT is a production assistance for cell therapies that will help with developing cellular therapies. There's also resources in the new center, the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, or NCATS, at the top. They also have a preclinical testing program called Bridges, and then the Therapeutics for Rare and Neglected Diseases program is a collaborative program that allows access to the intramural program's resources for high-throughput screening, and the CTSA program provides access to clinical trials-related infrastructure. We also see opportunity to work with, to access our existing clinical research networks for early phase clinical studies, and then to move back into the center for continued development after those resources provide the required component of technology development. We've been working very closely with the FDA, the Department of Commerce's U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and CMS from the beginning of developing this initiative, so that they'll provide to the awardees for the FDA, they'll provide regulatory assistance and regulatory strategy consultation, but they'll also get something back out of this because they'll get to see what's coming down the pike and which will inform the kinds of review processes they should be developing. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the Department of Commerce is going to make available IP assessment tools, and CMS is going to be on board to provide advice about reimbursement strategies right from the beginning so innovators can be thinking about this. And they'll also understand what's coming down the pike so they can think about how to develop their own reimbursement processes. So at the end of the day, these de-risk technologies will exit the center through a license to an existing for-profit or not-for-profit. If the plan is to spin out a new company, it'll be a well-put-together company with a solid business plan, a clear understanding of its intellectual property, and a regulatory strategy in place so that it will be poised to submit a very meritorious SBIR application that may be cut off, but it's at the lower right of your screen. And we also see this program as enhancing our STTR program by helping to matchmake folks who are moving through the center with existing small businesses. So we think that there's a lot of benefits to the community of taking this approach. We think it offers the potential to identify, accelerate, and increase the number of highly innovative scientific discoveries that are translated into marketable products, because the programs, this one and the ones that you'll hear about in a few minutes, address critical bottlenecks and gaps in the very early stages of the technology development process. We believe that they'll decrease the time from discovery to market, will increase the chances of success. We hope that the programs will encourage public-private partnerships with an integrated environment of resources, because those partnerships are required to speak into the technology development process, and that the programs will foster the kind of culture that's needed for sustained technology development at academic institutions. And so we realize that we cannot do this on our own. The federal government needs partners with the entire range of stakeholders across the development to commercialization pipeline, and that includes academia, small businesses, professional societies, sources of private capital, and industry. And so all of us working together can help improve the pathway of transitioning these technologies out into the public for public benefit. And so I hope that provided you an overview of the kinds of programs you'll be hearing about. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kurt Marek, who will talk to you about the SBIR STTR programs.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to provide some general information on the SBIR and STTR programs to start with, and then describe in detail how we implement the programs at the NIH and some additional resources that we have that are available to small businesses. In fiscal year 2012, the federal government distributed $2.5 billion to small businesses to perform research and develop technologies. Many of these projects had elements that were related to chemistry, including those that were funded by the National Institutes of Health. The Department of Defense had the largest program at $1.4 billion, followed by the NIH with a program of $770 million. 9 other agencies take up the remaining $400 million available through the SBIR and STTR programs. We often refer to the SBIR program, but really there are 2 sister programs, the Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR, and the Small Business Technology Transfer, or STTR programs. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to describe the similarities and differences between these 2 programs. The SBIR program is designed to advance federal research and development needs by funding small businesses, while the STTR program is designed to encourage partnerships between small businesses and nonprofit research institutions, and to transfer technology out of academic labs and into the private sector. There are 2 primary differences between the programs: who can perform the work and who can serve as the principal investigator. For the SBIR program, the small business has to perform at least 50% of the work, and generally 2/3 of the work. While in the STTR program, the small business concern must perform 40% of the work, while the research performing institution that they're partnered with needs to perform 30% of the work. The remaining 30% can be distributed however is appropriate for the research plan. For the SBIR program, the principal investigator must be employed by the small business concern, while for the STTR program, the principal investigator can be either at the small business or at the research performing institution that the business is partnered with. Both programs are designed to have 3 phases to reach commercialization. Phase 1 is for proof of concept or feasibility studies. Generally, research plans should last 6 to 12 months, and budgets should not exceed $150,000. This phase is designed to determine if a project will actually work. The second phase of the program is designed for full research and development and can generally last for 2 years with budgets up to $1 million. Budgets and durations can vary by agency, so please contact the agency that you're planning to apply to. Phase 3 is the commercialization phase and must be performed with non-SBIR money. Some agencies like the DoD will use phase 3 to actually acquire technologies from the businesses that they funded. Other agencies like the NIH generally do not fund phase 3 work. Trouble advancing here. There we go. Most of you have probably heard that Congress reauthorized the programs in 2012. They made a lot of significant changes to the programs, but I just want to touch on a few of the most important. First, the set aside of the programs is increasing to 3.65% in 2017. So there will be a lot larger pot of money available to small businesses. Second, several of the agencies, the NIH, NSF, and DOE, can now issue awards to companies that are backed by venture capital funds, private equity, or hedge funds. Third, you can now switch agencies between phase 1 and phase 2. So if you receive a phase 1 award from the DoD and you want to apply it to a civilian medical indication, you can now apply to the NIH for your phase 2 work. Finally, you can now switch between the STTR and SBIR programs, which makes a lot of sense for technologies that are transitioning out of the universities and to the private sector. I'd like to turn now to discussing how we implement the SBIR and STTR programs at the NIH and the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. As I mentioned, the NIH provided $770 million to small businesses last year, and the NHLBI, at the NHLBI, we supported small businesses to the tune of $85 million. We provide this support through two broad mechanisms: investigator-initiated grants and targeted funding opportunities, including specific grant announcements and contracts. But we provide much more than just money. I'll spend a few minutes at the end of this talk talking about some of the resources that we have available to small businesses. We encourage investigator-initiated grants for any topic within the mission of the NIH. We support biological, organic, medicinal, and structural chemistry. For example, we support a broad range of chemical and enzymatic synthesis methods, a few of which are listed here. We support investigator-initiated grants through what are termed the omnibus program announcements for the SBIR and STTR programs. The two program announcements are listed on this slide. And we have 3 submission deadlines per year, including one that's coming up next week on April 5th. I'd like to give just a few examples of our targeted funding opportunities, including one to support proteomics and glycomics research, a program to facilitate the transition of intellectual property out of the NIH to the private sector, and our Phase 2B program to provide additional support to successful Phase 2 awardees. We currently have an open funding opportunity to support research and development of tools for proteomics and glycomics, including sample preparation and separation, imaging, and mass spec. This program uses the same receipt dates that I mentioned earlier in April, August, and December, and the program announcements are linked here. The NIH has some of the most innovative laboratories in the world developing cutting-edge technologies. At the NHLBI, we have scientists working on nanotechnology, glycobiology, biophysics, just to name a few. But these scientists, unfortunately, can't start their own companies to develop them further. So we started the SBIR Technology Transfer Program to transition some of the more than 100 patented technologies out of our labs and into the private sector. There are 2 mechanisms for this program. First is an investigator-initiated program, where you can search through our database of licensable technologies and write a grant to use one or more of them. The database is linked here. It's called TechFinder. Second, we have tried to identify some of the technologies that are most ripe for development by small businesses, and we've created contract solicitations around them to support the development of specific products. In both cases, the investigator-initiated and with the contract solicitations, awardees are automatically given a non-exclusive license to develop technology and SBIR funding to do so. I told you earlier that the NIH does not fund the Phase 3 commercialization phase of the SBIR STTR programs, but we recognize that many Phase 2 awardees will need additional support to even get to Phase 3. So many of the institutes at the NIH offer Phase 2B programs. At the NHLBI, we call this our Phase 2B Bridge Award. Most of the Phase 2B programs allow investigators to request up to $1 million a year for up to 3 years. At the NHLBI, with our Bridge program, we encourage third-party investment that's equal to or greater than the NHLBI investment. And we give competitive preference to companies that can attract that kind of investment. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, we expect that the third party will do due diligence on the project prior to the award. Second, they'll do project management during the course of the award. And third, they'll help the company find independent financing after their award ends. The program announcement is listed here for our Bridge Award. And one other interesting note about this program, we allow Bridge applications from Phase 2 awardees that have awards at any other federal agency. So companies can switch from the DOE or NSF to the NHLBI for their Phase 2B funding. The last funding mechanism that I want to mention is the annual contract solicitation. The NIH issues one contract solicitation per year with over 100 topics, a few of which are listed here. Contracts differ from grants in that they require very specific deliverables. For more information on the contracts mechanism, you can go to the link provided on the slide, or you can contact me later, and I'm happy to talk to you. Finally, the NIH and the NHLBI offer a number of resources that are available to small businesses. The NIH has a niche assessment program for Phase 1 awardees to help them identify new markets for their products, and a commercialization assistance program for Phase 2 awardees to provide them with personalized help on any commercialization barrier that they may face, including regulatory barriers, reimbursement, and financing issues. The NHLBI recently hired a regulatory specialist to assist applicants and awardees with their regulatory strategies, and I'm happy to connect you with her if you have any questions about that. Finally, the NHLBI also offers 3 programs to assist with preclinical work for small molecules, biologics, gene therapy, and cell therapy. These programs offer assistance with production, preclinical toxicology and pharmacology, study design, and regulatory filings. The links for each of these programs, called GTRP or Gene Therapy Resource Program, Production Assistance for Cell Therapies, and the SMART program, or Science Moving Towards Research, Translation, and Therapy, are provided here. Finally, if you have any questions, I would encourage you to contact me or anybody at the NIH. It's the best tip for getting funding from the NIH is always to reach out and talk to a program official in advance. In addition, our website is shown here. We have lots of information and answers to frequently asked questions. And we've recently started dipping our toes into social media, so you can now follow us on Twitter as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. That was very nice. So we'll next hear from Dedrick Carter, who's going to tell us about the I-Corps program.
Well, it's good to be here. I'm going to talk with you briefly about the NSF I-Corps program. So about a year, I'm actually having some difficulty advancing slides as well. So here we go. If we think what's happening with R&D expenditures globally, basically, if you look at North America, Europe, and Central Asia, you see a huge concentration of R&D dollars. We wanted to figure out how can we look at what's happening globally, what's happening locally, and specifically what's happening with the NSF grantees. And that gave birth to the NSF I-Corps program. Launched in 2011, we really focused on a few boundary questions. Those were, what do we do, how do we leverage a $7 billion research portfolio and try to find ways to increase technological readiness? How do we create an experiment and a ripe environment for funding post-research that's probably just to the left of the SBIR program and STTR program at NSF, but really starts to drive entrepreneurship and lab-to-market behavior? Why is the NSF interested in these areas? And then finally, what do we hope to achieve, and does it work? Well, The NSF now has a portfolio of probably just under $200 million of programs that fit in this space. Most of our work is in basic science research, as many of you know, focused in the area of discovery, development, and commercialization. But we do have a series of programs that start to move towards taking things out of the laboratory and moving them to the marketplace. I-Corps sits right in the space that I like to call the ditch of death. There are lots of things that happen within the laboratory that where catalytic dollars beyond the research dollars are difficult to find. And our goal is to see if some small amount of money, and right now that amount of money is $50,000, and some bit of time, and that time is 6 months, partner with mentors who've done this work, can help to really move the technology out of the laboratory and towards the value of that. So we're trying to look at a suite of options, teams, sites, nodes, mentors, to really focus on how do we drive lab to marketplace behaviors. And that forms the fabric that is the flow diagram you see in front of you. So out of the cloud of NSF-funded research, a team is formed, and there are 3 people. Usually it's a PI, it's an entrepreneurial mentor, it's a well-funded, sort of excited graduate student who has the entrepreneurial lead. Those go through a rigorous selection process, very similar to actually applying for VC funding. From that, we make team awards, and usually those occur on a rolling basis. We're always looking for applications in partnership with universities. Those awards are typically made quarterly, and we actually have a session coming up next week and the week after at 2 of our node offerings. Those students go through a 6-month period. They look at the customer discovery process, and they focus on business model canvas refinement. This work is based on the work of Steve Blank with Lean Launchpad. Some of you may be familiar with Eric Rice's work, Lean Startup, but our focus is really on how do you discover customers for the technology that's come out of basic science research. How do we take that discovery and actually roll it into something that has a value proposition? So we partner with private sector partners, and the outcomes largely out of the end of the 6 months are a go or no-go decision. And we have seen some organizations that have said they would like to go for a license agreement, but really those are often farther downstream. It really is this something we'd like to move forward with? We want to give the runway to think about this nascent technology moving to a company. So it's really pre-SBIR. And we found that gap was something that really needed a little bit of time and energy to fill the void. And some dollars. But it turns out that the education and the mentoring is actually even more important than the dollars. So teams, sites, nodes. The teams are the beginning of the I-Corps program. Sites are something that we launched and just received the first set of proposals in for January, and those are really working with entrepreneurial centers at existing colleges and trying to determine if we can have some smaller version of the I-Corps program that's not $50K, but it's really $1,000 to the $3,000 grants to encourage entrepreneurship, largely at the student and graduate student level. And then the nodes is an area that I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about, because the idea for the nodes, we think about building a national network, is really to try to energize an area, a region. And their goal is to move not just at training the individuals through the first level curriculum, but also to think about tools and research that helps to really foster an innovation ecosystem nationally. So to that end, if I look at the awards that have been given to date for the I-Corps and the SBIR, STTR from NSF, you get the map that you see in front of you. And we're really excited about this map because what it does is it shows that there's a really nice sort of synergy between the I-Corps program and the SBIR, STTR program. So as Kurt talked with you about, we have clearly a very similar program at NSF where the SBIR program originated some 20, 30 years ago. And it ended up being a really nice sort of segue for the I-Corps program for entree into the SBIR program. We're looking to see how we can have better emphasis for segues into the STTR program. For sites, our real emphasis here is saying, what can we do to focus on building great translational research at a smaller level? And the award sizes there are about $100,000 over 3 years. I'm going to go straight to nodes in the interest of time. and say the thing that really excites me most, and I hope that many of you will find interest in as you try to engage it around your areas, is what's happening with our nodes. We have 5 nodes now. The first second grants that have come out in the last few months, we're actually going to see those nodes in action beginning in April. And their job is to think about, how do you look at these networks? We have over 100 teams, or teams of 3 people already working now. How do you look at these networks and see what can we gain from them to really sort of energize and have a greater sense of homogeneity across the country in entrepreneurial activity? And finally, in level 3, how do we help these individuals and academics who are really studying innovation think about how to better promote innovation in the country? 3 levels here, 3 nodes that have really emerged as leaders, I think, in the space are the DC, Maryland, Virginia, the New York City area, and the San Francisco Bay Area. And as you look back at the map that I talked about earlier, you'll see that there's still room for growth. I mean, we still have lots of opportunities. It's a rolling admission deadline for the I-Corps grant. What you need to do is find something that's an NSF funded technology. Bring together a team of 3 people, usually a business person who's a mentor, an entrepreneurial lead who would be a graduate student, and a PI, and get those individuals together to submit an application to the I-Corps program. They would be vetted through their program officer at the National Science Foundation, and then suggested to go on to the I-Corps program if they were successful. It's on a rolling basis. We expect the next class would be offered in the July time, beyond the ones that are happening in April and May, will be happening in the July time frame. So with that, I'll say in a nutshell, our goal for I-Corps is really to find a way to sort of ease technology from the lab into the marketplace through the SBIR, STTR program, but to fill the gap that we found there in the laboratory. We're looking to really focus on increasing network opportunities with scientists, engineers, and innovators, and NSF grantees. And more importantly, we're looking to support the strategy for the National Science Foundation to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem and really to leverage the investments we've already made. If we think about what has been invested in these companies prior to the $50,000 grant, on average, it has been somewhere in the order of $1 million that we're sprinkling some amount of money and mentoring with to try to really gain some additional value. Better?
So I'm here to talk from ARPA-E, the Department of Energy, and basically how we look at tech to market and how we integrate it basically into every part of our grants and our scientific discovery. I'll quickly mention just also that we're actually sending a couple of our grantees through the I-Corps program, and that's currently a kind of a pilot to see how that works. And we also have an SBIR program, which was mentioned earlier. And let's see if we can advance. And David, thank you very much. So the ARPA-E mission basically is to reduce imports, improve energy efficiency, and reduce emissions. And overrunning that, of course, we look at national security, economic security, but also a technological lead. We're supposed to basically sit at an early stage of energy research. And we'll try to. So we're a relatively new agency. We came out of a report from the National Academies in 2007, Rise Above the Gathering Storm. And later that year, we're put into the America Competes Act, which was signed by President Bush. Of course, we didn't have any money. We first got our first appropriations in 2009 and have been part of the budget all the way up to this last CR, which we got $265 million. So how do you think of what ARPA-E is supposed to do? The easiest graph is to kind of look at learning curves. So a lot of what applied offices here at DOE or just research in general is driving technology down a learning curve. We're kind of modeled after the DARPA over at the Department of Defense, and so we're trying to do absolutely out-of-the-box thinking to try to basically beat the learning curve. As you can see by the long blue line there, trying to accelerate cost and performance through a brand new technology to basically be disruptive. However, you see the other 3 lines in blue there, stop. A lot of what we do actually will not work out. I think it was mentioned earlier, many of the contracts or cooperative agreements we do, we have no-go milestones, and we'll stop a project if it's not meeting those milestones. And those milestones include many things of technology, but we also put tech-to-market milestones within the cooperative agreements. So one of the most important things in energy is not so much will it work or provide energy, but the cost. Everything comes down to cost, because if you can't beat, you know, $80 a barrel in a fuel, or if you can't get that battery to a certain level in cost, it's just never going to be used, and it doesn't really matter at that point. So what makes an ARPA-E project? Impact, so high impact of the mission, in our mission areas. Will it reduce emissions? Will it be technological lead? Will it help reduce energy imports? But the next, and most projects that apply usually get to the impact stage, or at least make the good pitch for the impact stage. The harder part has more to do with tech to market, and that's, is it transformative? Will it matter, essentially? So I can make a fuel just like gasoline, but you have to make it cheaper than gasoline, and you have to understand the gasoline market. Who are you selling to? Who are the refiners? Who are the people who are going to put it in tanks? Can it be used in a car? All these aspects you have to think about in the beginning. ARPA-E grants are 3-year cooperative agreements, and one thing we try to get you to think about if you've won one is what happens on month 37. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we go into tech to market. Bridging, basically what we're trying to do, again, is to take basic science and translate it into technology. We're kind of in a spot between here at DOE, the Office of Science, which looks at basic science, how nature works, and the applied offices who are working on existing technology and kind of driving those down that existing learning curve. Can we take something that was discovered recently and use it? Finally, we also look at teaming. We're a big fan of when academics get together with businesses or national labs get together with universities to try to get people, best-in-class people together but have different expertises. We're also a big fan of cross-disciplinary sets. So getting biologists to start thinking about carbon capture, or in a way that, say, the human lung can separate oxygen and carbon dioxide. Why can't a coal plant? Are we thinking about biofuels in the wrong way? Can it be done with bacteria rather than photosynthesis? Just are there different ways of getting scientific skill sets together? But this also includes getting academics talking to people who are in business and understand the various markets that energy creates. So how do we make a program or a project? So someone has to envision it, usually the program director, who is also term limited and here for 3 years. They have a workshop, which basically gets academia, business, other government agencies together to kind of hash out where we should be thinking of running a program. And this goes through the whole aspect of evaluating once we have the funding opportunity announcement. We do a merit review process of, like many government research institutions, with external merit review as well as internal merit review. But something we do that's a little different is right after that we allow the applicants to rebut the reviewers. So you get the reviewer and you are allowed to say, wait, you missed something. The trick is you get 3 pages and 3 days to rebut. And normally the 3 days starts on a Friday and we want it back by a Monday. Basically, we want to make it painful because we don't want a reapplication, but we do want the chance, because we are pushing the envelope on all of the science, to say, no, you didn't understand this part, or you didn't read this latest paper. We go all the way through. to project to the projects being awarded, to ongoing technical review, to a project handoff, and then hopefully toward the market. I'll explain that later. One thing though is when you do get selected for a program, we sit down and we negotiate milestones, not only of technical milestones, but also tech to market milestones. Not only will you be getting your catalyst to do X, Y, and Z by this certain date, will you have done a cost model of the area you think you're going to be selling to? Have you talked to certain people you think are going to be using this product? And energy is such a big term, and you really have to start thinking of this early. If you think about trying to make an air conditioner, which is a huge energy suck on the system, air conditioning in general, that's a very different market than, say, batteries. Batteries can be used in many things, and the battery manufacturers for, say, phones or cars have to go through a different supply chain than, say, air conditioners, where there's really only 3 or 4 major players in air conditioners, where the auto market has a huge supply chain and there are many players. Do you know that from the get-go, and are you thinking that way? Try that again. And waiting for the next slide. There we go. So this is basically how we think of the world. We basically think of the world as transportation energy technologies and stationary energy technologies, and you can see there's lots of overlap. These are our wonderful acronyms, which I won't go through them all, but generally speaking, in the transportation side, solely transportation area, we have 2 kinds of fuels, either genetically modifying plants to be fuel plants. Electrofuels is using electrons as a feedstock to bacteria to make fuel. BEAST is our advanced battery program. MOVE is our natural gas to vehicles program. In the kind of crossover area, there's heats, everything from heat batteries to using waste heat, but also storing heat either for later use, and you can imagine an electric car, since if you turn the heat on, you shorten your range, or like an advanced solar where you're just going after the heat, not so much electricity. REACT is a rare earth metals program. AMP is actually battery management. We're actually over-designing batteries because we don't actually know what's going on inside in real time. If we knew more about what was going on inside a battery, we could potentially make them a lot smaller and get more power out of them. You see we have an SBIR STTR program. Last time we did the SBIR STTR, we focused it on storage, energy storage technology. This year we're thinking of possibly putting it on grid routing or networking technology. Over in stationary, we have building technologies to carbon capture, to grid storage, to power electronics, which we see is an area that seems to be advancing very quickly, and then grid routing and algorithms. To look at SBIR, our tech-to-market model, to see how it works, if you see the top there, the blue, we try to identify a white space for research, create programs, select projects, and manage development. If you manage the blue part there, that's the technical side. But parallel to that is what really the tech market side works on. We try to make an early assessment on what's the value proposition. Does this matter? What are you giving a certain market? And do you know that this market is different from, that the air conditioner market is, say, different from the fuels market? We also try to give skills and resources. We have people here who come from the private sector, either from venture capital or working for major companies that have gone through this before, and try to give you the resources with cost modeling or the business plans and work with the applicants as they go forward. And finally, stakeholder engagement. And this is, I think ICOR does a great job of this as well, of kind of before you go, sell something, who do you think your customer is? Before you go try to sell something to them, you might want to go talk to them and find out what they really want. Many times, what you think you're trying to sell them, they're very fine with. But what they really want is something over here that your technology could do as well. So kind of go talk to everybody. Just don't assume that there's a market there. You need to go out and really kind of pound the pavement. So where do we think, I think, in this kind of techno-economics and providing value, what do we kind of encourage for different technologies to do? Well, it's different in every case. So when you're looking at handoffs or tech to market, it's not only just getting it to the private sector, it's really just getting it to the next stage. So one of the things we think of, since our projects are only 3 years, is other government handoffs that can sometimes take this. We have a number of our projects in the storage area and in the heating and cooling area that we're handing off for further research to the Department of Defense. Thermal management and energy use on forward operating bases is a huge issue. And to get that technology a little bit closer or some more research that can actually work right now and makes economic sense in a forward operating base, but would not make economic sense in, say, downtown Washington, D.C. But the development and the use of it by the military in extreme environments can actually help drive down costs. And so we constantly think, are there other government agencies that could see value in some other part of this technology that's either more robust or lighter to help drive down the cost to eventually get it to the markets, the domestic market here within the U.S. So we've had a number of projects going to the Army Research Lab, but also here at DOE, handing off early stage technology to for the example we have is the geothermal program is interested in one of our laser drills. It needs further development and further testing, but after 3 years, we basically proved that it should be handed off for further research. So that's always one side of tech to market is sometimes you don't have to jump all the way to the market on the first jump. Play some hopscotch in between, as long as you think or start planning on what is your next funding step, what is your next grant. Of course, there's always strategic partnerships, creating MOUs. ARPA-E here ourselves, we've actually created MOUs with Duke and EPRI, Duke Power and EPRI, to identify test beds. So where can we use a grid somewhere that we can test some of these products on? One of our recent awardees, SmartWare Grid, we had an agreement with the TVA for them to use some of the technology on the wires to try to route electricity. There's, of course, strategic partnerships of just getting the project to the OEMs, in the case of cars, to get them into GM and start partnering early on with the people who you think you might be your customer. And finally, there's just creating companies, getting your IP in order, and understanding that when taking from the university and spinning out companies. To date, we've had about 12 of our projects go from university to a company, or the company was created just as the grant was coming in. So City of New York became Urban Electric Power, MIT became Embry. These projects started seeing that there was value in actually creating a company. But that could be a great goal for some of them, but in some it might be going to another federal agency, and some it might be just a strategic partnership. So I guess the answer is that you should be thinking about it early, and we try to make people think about it early. But there are many answers at the end, and it is a very complex system in that you don't want to be in the position where you've invented this great new technology and it's a great box, and when you go to sell it, GM says, "That's wonderful, I'd love that, but it should have been a rectangle, and since it's a cube, I can't use it." So you kind of want to know that it's a rectangle from day one, and not go all the way down into your research before knowing where you're at.
Peder, thanks for that presentation. We're at the near the end of our time, and we want to make sure that we have a chance for at least one question from the audience. So I apologize, I'm breaking in, and we're going to go back to Steve.
Okay, yeah, that was my last slide.
Okay, very good. So again, audience, they cannot hear us, so we're going to have to, if you raise your hands, we probably have time for one, maybe two very, very brief questions that David is going to have to translate over the line to the panelists. Are there questions? One question.
My question deals with the delay to bring down the SBIR. 8-9 months I can't hear you.
Turn
Sorry,
the mic.
I can't hear you.
Turn the mic on.
Yeah, go ahead and talk.
My main question is the delay in adopting SBIR.
Can you face me? I can read your lips. Yeah.
8 months to hear back from an SBIR grant. For a startup, it takes a long time. Do you think you can get a
Okay, the question is, it takes months to hear back from an SBIR application. It has anything, and as a startup, that's a long time. So is anything being done to address that issue?
Absolutely. That was something that Congress actually included in the reauthorization, was instructions to reduce our time from the publication of the solicitation to the award. And at the NIH, we are actively working to develop new processes to actually shorten the award time. Right now, it takes 9 to 12 months to get an award, and we recognize that that is just far too long for small businesses, and we are working to try to shorten that duration.
So let me just...
I can jump in. We've also tried to, when you apply to all 3 phases of SBIR at once, so there's no wait time between. So you get phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. All the money is obligated. Now, each phase is a milestone. So if you don't do what you promised in phase 1, we take the money back. But as you transition between those phases, you don't have to reapply, and you get all the money up front. So it's a continuous process.
So let me just say that...
at least that's in our SBIR program.
I have business...
That message loud and clear, as well as we were going around the country before the I-Corps program. So we put in the I-Corps program a rolling grant deadline to make sure we address that. So let me just say that I have business cards for Kurt Marek with me, and I also have some of my own through the NIH. So if there is additional questions and you want to direct them to people on the screen, come and get a business card, and we can do it electronically after the fact. Thank you very much. Let's thank the panelists as well.
Yes, please join us. Jodi, Peder, Kurt, and Dietrich, thank you very much. Stephen, thank you.